All right. Welcome to today's episode of PDX Black Rose. I'm Alex Gebreab, Seoul District Business Navigator, as well as your co-host. I also have John Washington, Executive Director, here with us
Oh,
today.
good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
His presence has been felt. And today we're going to dive deep into the story of individuals shaping our communities. We are thrilled to have Jessie Burke with us, a figure who's not just reshaping downtown Portland through her entrepreneurial spirit, but is now setting her sights on a broader horizon as she launches her run for the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners. Jessie is no stranger to the heartbeats of Portland as the owner of the popular Posey's Bakery and Cafe and the co-founder of the Society Hotel in Portland's Old Town. She's been at the forefront of fostering community spaces that bring people together. Beyond her business acumen, Jessie has become a leading advocate for revitalizing downtown, especially in the face of challenges brought on by the pandemic. Her leadership in the Old Town Neighborhood Association and her proactive stance on issues like homelessness, safety, and local business support have made her a prominent voice in our city. But Jessie's commitment to Portland doesn't stop at her business doors. Her involvement in Governor Kotek's Downtown Portland Task Force and her role as campaign manager for Nathan Vasquez's district attorney race underscore her deep engagement with the city's future. Now she steps into the political arena herself, aiming to fill the district number 2 seat on the Multnomah County Board of Commissioner. Jessie brings a vision of quick, effective action and community-focused leadership. Today, we're going to get to know the woman behind the vision, her motivations, her insights, and her dreams for Multnomah County. Whether it's her plans for a more inclusive and vibrant community, or just what she does to unwind after a long day. We're uncovering it all. So let's give a big warm welcome to Jessie Burke.
Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome.
Yes, boy, that was a whole lot. You just
Yes.
had to drop down there. Yeah.
Whole mouthful. So I'm going to let her kind of give us a little bit of background intro on herself, and get a little, and then we'll jump right into the questions.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Well, you gave a lot of my story here in Portland, so I'll tell you a little bit of how I got here. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and I think it's important to sort of share some of these pivotal moments that got me to this place. So when I was 6, my father was paralyzed, and about 4 years later, my sister was born with a severe birth defect. And so it got to a place where my parents were just drowning in debt, and my mother was cleaning houses for income, and we just could not, they could not get out. And they told us at a very young age that we needed to become good at something if we wanted to get out of poverty. So they sort of put us in different sports. Mine was fencing. My brother was soccer. My sister was too little at the time. And so I did okay, pretty young. And then when I was about 12, I won a national competition. And they said, "What do you want to do with this?" So keep in mind, this is in 1992. I said, I want to go to the 96 Olympics. And so they sent me to Rochester, New York, which was the new women's training center. And I lived there. And I actually was an alternate when I was 15 to the Atlanta Games. So they take you down and you train with the team. And that was my profession. That was my first job. I would go to World Cups and have to win money. Most other athletes actually come from wealthier families. I was not that person, and so I had to go win money to pay rent or have food. I had a World Cup once where the taxi driver stole all my money, and I was like 15 or 16, and I went the whole weekend without eating. I had to go to the competition still, but I didn't have any food. So there's a lot of financial and food insecurity for me growing up. And ultimately, I forwent the 2000 Olympic trials I had to choose between going to college at that moment or continuing to try for the Olympics. And there was just too much instability. So I called Penn State and asked if I could, this was in May of 1999. I asked if I could start college in August.
Wow.
and they said yes. So I headed down to Penn State, and that was sort of the stabilizing moment for me because I had a full scholarship, I had food, I had a place to live, and from there I really wanted to use my time there to figure out the system because my parents never could. So I went into teaching. My degree is in education, and my minor was in education theory and policy. While I was there, I had to fence the whole time because that's what I was being paid to do, like I was sharing earlier.
Yeah, you ain't no stranger to some work.
Yeah, yeah. So,
You know.
yeah, I actually had a regular job. I fenced, and I was going to school, but I won NCAAs my freshman year in the individual event and the team event, and I was All-American every year except when I was hospitalized for something. And I ended up meeting my husband there, and he wanted to move out to Portland. I thought I was going to go to New York, and he wanted to go to Portland.
Well, you was big lights and all that, doing that fencing on TV or something,
Yeah, so we headed out here, and I actually taught at an after-school program at Roosevelt High School. It was my first job here. And then got a job as the education coordinator for the Native American Youth and Family Center. So I worked there for about a year, and my job was to help students either finish high school or get into college. And then I went back to get my master's degree from Portland State in public administration, and I focused on strategic planning and community development. And in that time, I was interning at Prosper Portland, and then I got a temp job at an investment banking firm, and I was just sort of observing everyone's behavior, and I felt like I thought I should be in the public sector, or maybe what we all think, that nonprofits and government are doing God's work, and so and private sector is bad. And I was observing people and noticing that I thought we were all there for the greater good, and I actually started to notice people were actually just planning to run for office, which was really disheartening to me.
So like building a resume to run for office?
Yeah, and that every move that was being made wasn't actually for the greater good. And this had happened to me early on in my fencing career, where I thought everyone went to the Olympics based on merit. And in 1996, when your country hosts, you're guaranteed a team. So everyone comes out of the woodwork. And there was a woman who was very wealthy, and she was paying athletes from poorer countries to lose to her on purpose. So she would climb the ranks and qualify for the Olympics.
Wow.
And I was and it was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. They interviewed us. They're like, is this true? And I said, yes. Can you prove it? I said, do you get receipts for bribery? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I think it was all kind of scrambling in my head, like, wait, nothing works the way I thought it did.
Yeah.
And then I got a temp job at an investment banking firm. And these guys were crazy. They were super mean. They were super rich. And I was like, why do you do this job? And they were like, for money and power. And I was like, even though I don't agree with why you're doing this, at least you told the truth. And that they could be in their profession and just tell people what they thought. And I told my husband, I think I could help more people just because I chose to, without any red tape. If I just opened a little business myself and I helped my community outside, like in Kenton, or any of my employees or anyone that came in the door, I think that I could do more and figure out the system and help more people that way. So that's where Posies came from. I actually wrote my business plan at that investment banking firm job.
Okay.
And so, yeah. And then, you read about the Posies, but I started the Kenton Street Fair there. I did a lot of connecting landlords with tenants that were interested. I used to write, you remember they had the storefront grant for Prosper Portland?
Right.
So I used to submit everyone's applications, even if they didn't know, so that I could just hold the money for them for when they were ready. And eventually we looked at this project in ChinaTown because my mom is Chinese, and I was like, oh, well, in Washington, D.C., I watched ChinaTown be thriving and die in my lifetime, and then come back as AT&T stores. So I thought it could be an interesting project to try and revitalize a Chinatown here.
Wow.
So anyway, ultimately, all of it was how much can I figure out the system, and what is interesting to me as a profession, but can I help as many people as possible with understanding the system? So even Posies, the reason I opened a bakery was my parents were still living in my aunt's basement 30 years later. So I opened it so my mother had gone back to pastry school. So I opened it so she could come work there.
Okay. And they're out here now in Portland?
Yeah, my father's passed away, but my mother still lives here. And so sort of everything that is happening is sort of has this little bit of another reason that I chose that route. I have no right to be a bakery owner. I have no qualifications whatsoever. Yeah. But the reason was to help my family navigate the system.
Okay. Well, I mean, you kind of answered it in your intro, but well, because I
was going to wonder what you gonna do with all of that.
Well, I mean, you hit a lot of them, but my thing is that because I was trying to figure out, it seems like you got a really successful resume in the private sector, and I was just trying to figure out what was the motivation behind running for this specific role that you're running into, and what are you looking to do in terms of application within that seat?
Yeah. So in the last 4 years, I'm sure you guys have noticed things have gotten a little harder in Portland.
Say the least.
It's an understatement.
That understatement, yeah, yes. Underwater.
Yes. Yeah. And I tell people working in Old Town, because there actually aren't a lot of people that live downtown, you kind of have a front row seat with giant picture windows to human suffering all day long. And in 2020, the pandemic is happening. Maybe this is 2020, 2021. The forest fires, the only people outside were either high or extremely mentally ill. And our private security company came and said, "Do you have any ties to the Chinese mafia?" And I was like, "No." And they said, "Well, organized crime is coming. We have Armenian gangs, Somali gangs, Mexican gangs. 18th Street gang has taken over St. John's. You could help with ownership, because this is ChinaTown." And I was like, "Fine. The building next door is run by the Chinese mafia. All orders go from Portland to New York to Hong Kong. I'll give you their number, but I won't have anything to do with it." And I did see an uptick of that type of, and it was early on. It doesn't happen as overtly as it did when no one was downtown. And then in 2021,
makes sense why I'm seeing all these massage parlors popping up all over town all of a sudden.
Perhaps I can't.
I don't know,
but maybe. And so in 2021, I got my phone started ringing off the hook at like 11 p.m. And it was all the residents and small business owners in Old Town, and they said 300 rounds were just shot. And I was like, "Why are you calling me? You should call the police." And they were like, "I don't know that they'll come." And I went into work the next day, and I got the audio from our rooftop deck, because we have cameras up there. And it was so upsetting, because it wasn't just 300 rounds shot. There was a machine gun that was being shot. And to hear that for the first time and know that it happened right outside your door totally shifted sort of like my feeling like we're spiraling out of control. And I went on a call with the mayor's office that I happened to have that morning, and I didn't know my mic was on, and I let out this big sigh, and they were like, "It's a pretty big sigh, Jessie, are you okay?" And I'm not generally very emotional, but I burst into tears. And I was like, "I'm not. Is anyone here? There was a machine gun shootout last night, and no one called the police. They called me." And that's too much. I don't know what to do with that. I am a citizen that is just trying to run a small business, and this is too much pressure. So what ended up coming from that was the mayor's office asking me to write a recovery plan. So that's what those 90-day resets were. And it was very specific and measurable, and I noticed bureaus like doing it because they could tick it off a list and feel accomplished. And then they asked me to do one for Central East Side, and then they asked me to do it for St. John's. And I was like, man, like, is anyone at work? Like, why am I doing it?
So that 90-day reset was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you, is if you can go a little bit deeper into kind of like the components of that plan.
Sure.
Because I thought it was pretty interesting.
The three areas, so the Old Town Community Association had a strategic plan that I developed for them that focused on three areas, which was safety, cleanliness, and accessibility. And that was already long established before the pandemic or anything like that. So I made those our three major categories, and then put some specific things that could happen. So for example, I wanted the lumens in the lamp posts to be increased by 100%. Right, so you can measure those things. So are we successful or not? And one of the things I requested was for Clean and Safe, we all pay into Clean and Safe. I need 3 dedicated cleaners that never leave this district, because Clean and Safe goes to downtown and Old Town, and why would you ever cross Burnside if you didn't have to? So I said, I need you to stay here, and I need a dedicated truck. I said, we need 60 inches of walkway down the sidewalk at all times. It is unfair to people that are using wheelchairs, have walkers. We have a ton of customers. We have a whole group that are blind that they get coffee at the hotel. And so I just tried to be as specific as possible. Have you heard of SMART goals?
Yep.
Like, that's all I'm ever doing. That it's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and there's a timeline. So anyway, the reason I chose this route was I was like, at this point, I am a volunteer citizen doing an exorbitant amount of work for apparently the government. And, the county always iced me out, so I could never get them to help me with anything. But when this came up, I was actually asked by one of the current commissioners to run for this vacant seat. And I felt it was important to help because I'm helping a lot in Old Town, and I kind of just beg people to do the things that I'm asking, but maybe I wouldn't have to beg so much if I was in a position to be making a decision. And county versus city, county's a little bit lower profile, and I have 3 kids, and I didn't want to put them in a fight they didn't ask for.
Yeah.
And lastly, I'll say the thing that's important for people to know is the difference between the county and city. The city is responsible for the health of the infrastructure, so roads, water, permits, and first responders. The county is responsible for the health of its citizens, so addiction services, mental health services, SNAP benefits, OHP. So whatever you're upset about, everyone goes to City Hall, but just differentiating the thing that you're frustrated with. What should you be testifying to the county? And they get no testimony ever. That's, it would be much more effective if more people.
So is that that's just from a lack of awareness, citizens' behalf?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I mean, Portland is probably more unique than just about any other city. I mean, when it comes to two types of government, running the city. So the fact that it's divided like it is, it really makes it a little bit strenuous in terms of figuring out how to navigate it, so I think that's a key point.
Yeah.
But I think the other key point, Alex, is whoa. Who running against this woman? Because they got some issues. You know what I'm saying? Because they got somebody seriously determined, a competitor in the arena. So, I'm sitting here wondering, so who is she running against? They need to be shaking in their boots right about now. But go ahead, man.
Well, off top, I think Commissioner Ryan is running for the same district as you.
He's running for city council.
Okay, city council, all right.
The 2 people that are running for county are Shannon Singleton, who ran the Joint Office of Homeless Services for a couple of months, and then Sam Adams just entered the race.
Yes, I just saw that with Sam Adams last week. They did mention that. So you talk around a lot about like tackling homelessness, drug addiction, behavioral issues and stuff like that. Obviously, it's a hot topic in Portland. It consistently comes up. People keep saying kind of what their plans are around that. Specifically for you, what are some of your plans that you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. So some of what I see a lot with the county is that they will say things like, we will provide adequate housing, adequate staffing, and that's not measurable, right? So one of the things I asked for a couple of years ago is it's too hard to access shelter. I don't know if you've ever tried to get someone into shelter.
Yeah.
Right? Call 211.
Treatment, shelter, any place right about now. It's hard to get anybody in residential anything.
So you call 211. They email you a list of all the shelters. You have to call every single shelter to see if there's space. Usually they're reservation based, and it's a 2 to 3 week waiting list. If you're calling, you're usually in crisis and you need it right now. And then if you do find a spot, you have to go to a central registration site, which is in Old Town, and then they'll give you a bus ticket to get there. I explained to the county a few years ago, we are talking about the most vulnerable citizens here. why is this so hard? And I said, you need a central database of available shelter beds. I can help you. It's hotel software, right? If every shelter used the same software that hotels did, and it's not expensive, it's like $200 a month, to say how many beds you have available, is it taken, who's there, how long are they going to be here? And that database is then fed in via an API into something like a booking.com, right? So you could see real time how many beds are available at any given time and know to call that one.
So centralizing the system.
That's right. And I've had some shelters say, oh, but what about people's medical information? And I said, do you think I have all of my customers' medical information? I just need to know your name and when you're coming. That's it. So we're sort of overcomplicating this right now. And the other reason you need that is, have you heard of Martin versus Boise?
No.
So part of the reason that we're running into issues with being able to move people to shelter or enforce any sort of camping rules, Martin versus Boise is a Ninth Circuit case which is Idaho, Washington, Oregon, where you can't arrest someone for camping unless you have somewhere for them to go.
Right.
I'm not suggesting...
Well, I didn't know that was the name of the law, but I knew that.
Yeah, so I'm not suggesting anyone gets arrested, but that you... So I asked the question, how would we ever know if we have somewhere for people to go? We don't know how many beds are available at any given time. So can we just make a database to be like, okay, there is a place for you to go. Do you want to go? Yes or no? And if people are like, no way, I want to do this forever, then you have something to work with. But right now, we're just operating willfully with no data. And it's dysfunctional. The other is sobering centers need to exist. And it's a little more complicated now because sobering centers that we once had were for people that were drunk.
You mean detox centers?
Well, sobering centers, so like they had the Cheers van before. So if you were drunk, and this is like before my time in Portland, but if you were drunk downtown and just sort of like laying on the sidewalk, they would pick you up and take you to a sobering center and you would sober up and then you could go back into the world.
Right.
And so it's not detox necessarily, but we need to modify this program because what you're experiencing, I know what I'm experiencing in Old Town is that the two main drugs right now will be meth, amphetamine, and fentanyl. Meth, the new version of it, P2P meth, is rotting people's frontal lobes and inducing psychosis, and it's making people much more aggressive. This version of meth, the previous meth with purifiedrin, people weren't as aggressive, but we're having people be chased down the street, people have hatchets, people, like this is otherworldly. People that are high on that type of drug cannot just freely roam the streets. You cannot allow that.
And we,
type of
so
chaos.
quote unquote, we chose to legalize that a couple of years ago.
Well, we chose to legalize possession.
Yeah.
Right. The thing that I've been pushing on is I actually don't care what's in your pocket. You cannot use in public, and you cannot be high in public because to be high on methamphetamine is a risk to the public. To be high on fentanyl is a risk to you. People that are passed out on the street, that's who's usually getting taken and trafficked because they're not present. That's who's getting sexually assaulted on the streets because they're not there anymore. So sobering centers would exist to allow, it's not jail. It's just, you can sober up here. Go through your high here. You cannot just roam the streets like this. It's too dangerous.
That's an interesting concept, though. I don't know if you know this. My background is in chemical dependency and behavioral modification. I helped write the state's drug and alcohol ORs for this state and the state of Washington. I've also written programs for gang intervention, studying the Yakuza, the history of the gangs coming from foreign countries to the United States. So I've had a pretty extensive background in this stuff, and this is probably one of the most unique profiles around these issues, because it appears to me like there's more than just one issue infiltrating the drug reality or the addiction reality. And one of it is the issue of mental health. You know, and this state has really been negligent in the issue of mental health. And even in the state's mental health property down in Salem, they modified that and just put out all the clients and the patients out onto the street. And I think that when you look at this homelessness, I think that there's a real determination or a pretty good indicator that there's three types of homeless people. There's homeless people, and you can see those people who are homeless to still have some sense of dignity and some. If they need a tent or whatever, they'll go off into a corner somewhere. It's pretty neat. They keep it kind of quiet. And then you have the mental health issues, and then you have the chemical dependency issues types. Now, those mental health issues, you can see clearly who they are because it's trash spewed out, more than like 100 feet from where they're at, and toilet paper, all this kind of stuff. And then, of course, the chemically dependent, you see them, they shelter and dig in, but they're continuously there and they continuously decline within that space. So I don't know if your plan is really comprehensive enough to begin to address all those. What do you think? Are you looking at all those aspects in here?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I'm always saying there are two types of people that are homeless outside. The actually vulnerable and those preying on the vulnerable.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to look at it too. I mean,
And I see that. One of the things that you were sharing, that one of the things I testified to City Council recently is there's a direct correlation between the exploding mental health crisis and methamphetamine.
Yes.
That the way that P2P meth rots people's frontal lobes, and there is no evidence that it is reversible.
Yeah.
It's not that we suddenly have everyone that is mentally ill living in Portland. It's that the drug that is being taken is resulting in mental health crises.
It's creating the crisis.
Right. So that's why I put the mental health and the addiction together, because it's like it's coming from the addiction.
Yeah.
So anyway, to the point of the actually vulnerable and those preying on the vulnerable, that what I want to see are, we cannot just have mental health institutions, that we need to have more options. One of the things that I was really pushing for at the county was we need care facilities. This is not, there was a woman, Emily, who she was honestly living in Old Town in a doorway for 30 years. And someone was telling me her story was that she had come down because all the nightclubs were in Old Town. She had 2 young kids at home, and someone drugged her, and it wasn't meth at the time, but whatever the drug was, she lost her mind, and she had lived down there ever since. And people continued to drug her, people continued to sexually assault her. And I said, one of my litmus tests for success is getting Emily taken care of, someone to care for her in a safe facility, not in the doorway down the street. And I said this in, I think, 2022, and she died 6 months later on the sidewalk. And that for people to say, just leave everyone be, this is their choice, you should be okay with this, you're being judgmental. What I say to them is, judgment is discernment. I can discern that this is not humane. This is not how we care for struggling citizens. And if you can't see that, I don't want to work with you. That this isn't how we care in our safety net. This isn't the social contract. I tell my husband, if I lose my mind, please take me out of Oregon, because this isn't the place that I'm going to be taken care of.
So you know what's interesting? I feel like at some point we had a softer stance on some of these things, but collectively as a city and as a state, I could see us making that transition where we want to take a little bit of a tougher stance. So, people like you, Commissioner Gonzalez, Nathan Vasquez, who you're campaign manager for him, right? Are you?
Say that again.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you guys are, in support, taking a little bit of a more of a tougher stance on some of these things, especially with Measure 110 and kind of like the reversal that's happening. And the interesting thing is, it sounds like people in Portland are actually in support of that. So I feel like there's like this transition that we're making.
I think so.
We're just not accepting of it anymore.
Yeah, the tide is definitely shifting. But I think the thing that has had to change is the vernacular that we use around it. Because I don't really see it as being tough on anyone, because that's the thing people are worried about, right? I don't want you to punish people for their struggle, right? If 98% of people that are chronically homeless were abused as children, and almost 100% their addiction and mental health issues are coping mechanisms for that abuse, surely we don't want the solution to be punishing them. I don't know that it's getting tougher. I think that it's having a more realistic goal for humanity, right? I tell people the social contract is we're all going to be contributing members of society. And if you fall through the cracks, we'll catch you. And it's not a perfect system, but catching you is you'll get food stamps, a bus pass, we'll help you find housing, whatever that looks like, with the goal of you getting back to being a contributing member of society. If you can't get back to being a contributing member of society because of mental health issues or something else, we will provide care for you. But the solution is not you get to just sleep on the sidewalk and get trafficked and exploited. That is not care. And it drives me crazy. I watch it all day long, and it drives me crazy to have people, I'm not sure even what their politics are, that I was like, can you even just see people's humanity and that they're suffering? And I'm sure they don't want this for themselves.
Well, I'm speechless on some part of it, but I like to open up a little something. Are you open to?
Yeah.
Based on your history, for example, I mean, I've listened to you. You've had a rather interesting career from a child all the way. I mean, you've, like myself, you've had the opportunity through sport to elevate and to evolve yourself and involve yourself in more of what we call the higher echelons of life. You know, you've been able to be in places. I mean, after all, fencing is not something you go to the hood and do. You know what I'm saying? So, but fencing allowed you to access that upper standard, that upper level of folks. Now, what you still have those types of relationships. When they hear you speak like this, and sometimes when I'm hearing people speak like this about the condition of people on the streets, they're that liberal, loving, kind of language. Are your colleagues feeling the same way about this when you speak to quote unquote money people?
Well, I wouldn't say that my circle in Portland is necessarily money people, because I think it's really hard to forget what you grew up in. And I mean, I lost a brother-in-law to a heroin overdose. A lot of my relatives back east are still living in subsidized housing and addicted.
Come on, let us know.
So it's hard to, I'm not in an orbit where everyone is really wealthy. I've just been studying this topic for a while, and so I think my fencing world, that is who I grew up with, but they don't live here, so I don't really know.
But you know, you hear that kind of question because there is a real interesting approach to these things, and I think that for a long time, I think Portland's approach is pretty much so the kind, tender touch onto these issues over the history of it. And I think that to a greater degree, you and I both come in from someone from the East Coast. There's a low tolerance for that kind of stuff.
That's right.
Right. So, but trafficking and all that stuff, it all still exists back there, you know. And but at the same time, there's so much mitigating other aspects of this, meaning people are coming from other places, coming here, bringing their desires to believe that Portland is a drug capital and they can get away with petty crime or property crimes and they can sleep out on the street and do all that. I mean, at what point in time does a line get drawn in the sand as to what we accept and what we don't accept, and then begin the method of habilitation, because rehabilitation means to return to its original working order, but we know this is broken. So this system is broken on this level. So the habilitative reality of it. So then, are you proposing an habilitative reality or approach to this thing and the system, or is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think that I tell people all the time, if you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done.
That's a statement I've made many times, but I'm in agreement.
And I think that there is a lot to work with here, and I tell people all the time, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Other states exist and deal with these problems. And for example, some county social workers came to me just of their own volition as just someone that was very vocal in Old Town, and I said, how can I tangibly help you? They said, we need a definition for gravely disabled.
Wow.
So that we can help people
Wow.
faster. So I said, what state has it? And they said, I don't know. And I said, actually, I'll bet Massachusetts has it. Massachusetts is always ranked top 5.
Mass.
And I looked it up. I found Massachusetts had a definition for gravely disabled, and I sent it to the state.
Wow.
And I said, please don't change this verbiage, except Massachusetts to Oregon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I see a lot is we take all sorts of suggestions from around the world, and we're like, we're going to make it our own. And I tell people, we are not special. We do not have to make new policies with ones that work already. So can we just work with what someone else has successfully done? Which, you see this with Built for Zero. You've heard of them trying to implement Built for Zero. They're at functional zero,
Wow.
which is 17 homeless people in the town in Maryland where it started. They're trying to do it here. They cannot get anyone to move on continuing.
Well, that's that dysfunction you were talking about. You know, it always feels like that it's been there. So, and I mean, lastly, before we get ready to wrap it up, so how do you envision downtown Portland in the future, and I guess Multnomah County as a whole?
What I would love is for our citizens to not have to know this much about how everything works. That we are fighting like hell just to have baseline functioning. We're wondering, like, why are we the highest taxed in the whole country?
Yep.
Right? And everyone's like, well, second to Manhattan. The trigger for the highest tax rate in Multnomah County is $120,000 of income. The trigger for Manhattan is $20 million of income.
Wow.
So by those numbers, we're the highest, right?
Yeah.
What are we getting? And so I think that what I envision, and I said this in an interview yesterday, that I think they need some people with executive experience.
Yeah.
Because we don't seem to have that. We can't study things forever. You have to make a budget, make a plan, and execute, and then study the results after. But that we're stuck in analysis paralysis. So truthfully, I don't want citizens to have to know this much. I want the system to work for them. And I want our leadership to remember that they are public servants. They don't have the luxury of not believing the public. They don't have the luxury of not serving the public. And so in an ideal world, that's what we can get to.
Yeah, and I agree with that, John. I'll let you hop in on this one. But you know, when we're out there in the streets and stuff like that, it seems like the reoccurring thing that we get is lack of competency.
Yes.
From local government, that all the citizens are saying. It just seems like you said, you started off with dysfunction, and then lacking competency. It just seems like people don't know what they're doing, and we can't all get on the same board.
Have you ever read the book The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team?
No.
So it's an awesome business book, and I actually sent a digital copy to everyone at the city and county government.
Send it to us also. We read books.
So I said, you guys have all 5 of these. Let me know if you'd like me to facilitate a training.
Yeah. Well, we're business-minded people, as you are, and I have a little bit of a concern, and that concern is that we're turning ourselves more into the condition into a dependency model. Okay, and that makes me a little bit uncomfortable as business owners and people who advocate for and support for business. And I'm going to ask you this question, but then there's something at the end I would like to say. Small businesses often play a vital role in providing employment opportunities and economic stability within communities, right? How can Multnomah County leverage the social service infrastructure to support small businesses, particularly those small businesses that are represented in underrepresented groups, okay, and increasing resources and workforce development initiatives? That's the question.
I think that one area that could be the fastest and lowest hanging fruit is a little bit of what we talked about a second ago about needing care facilities, right? So those are typically privately run, and they can be contracted. One of the things that recently changed, and Oregon is, I think, one of 2 states that got approval for this, is that Medicare or Medicaid at the federal level is now allowed to be used for housing. So if people needed a care facility, they could, and I'm thinking like adult, I think it's adult foster care systems, or sort of like a nursing home facility where it's safe for people to be. Those are typically privately run. I don't think that the government needs to run all of them. I don't know that nonprofits need to run all of them. That's like an early and easy opportunity to create those contract opportunities. And we get money for this stuff.
What's funny about that is there's a report that came out that said we have too many open foster homes and not enough people inside them. But then we have all these people that need those services.
Right. So wouldn't it be amazing to have a matchmaking program?
Right. Well, in order to be able to pay these people to do the work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So do you agree, though, or maybe the question that I'm asking you, has the American dream changed? Okay. I mean, really.
Yeah.
I mean, give me a,
I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know that the American dream has changed. I think that what is happening is, and I think it's a little bit of what you were saying, this idea that business is bad, that nonprofits and government are doing God's work and private sector is the devil. And I tell people this a lot, that I was like, what do you do when friends come to visit? Do you go visit all your local nonprofits? No. You go to little shops. You go to restaurants. That's us. So, and people tell me all the time, like when they're mad at me, what are you, Jeff Bezos? It's like, yeah, exactly the same, right?
Well, you might be close, though. I mean, Bezos might have a little problem with you, but you got that sword in your head.
But that I think that people are not, I think affordability-wise, American Dream is changing. I think that the way people are viewing business at this moment in time is a little uninformed. And I think one of the things I don't like about social media is sort of the little taglines and snippets that people just take away with, and they don't read anything about anything. They know nothing about history, and they just run with it. And it sort of makes everyone a little meaner rather than trying to understand, little businesses are not guaranteed a paycheck. Little businesses have to hustle to get every dollar in, and then to have your community come back to you and say, all you care about is money. And I was like, well, do you care about money? Because you have a job.
Right.
We both care about our income. We just have different jobs.
Right.
So I think that we need to stop dumbing down that conversation about private sector and the need for it. Because in Oregon, 80% of people are employed at small businesses. So
wow. I mean, so, yeah. Well, go ahead, Alex. Yeah. Hey, man, this is interesting. Getting more interesting. Probably run. You want to give it a wrap up or what?
Yeah. We're going to get ready to wrap it up. But Jessie, District 2, Multnomah County Commissioner, is there any, before we wrap it up, is there any dates that you want to throw out there that, the people should be aware of? Any dates coming up?
Yeah,
Well, hold on. Before you answer the date part, and I usually like to hear this because a lot of times as jocks, we don't always ask all the right questions, right? And the person sitting there listening in their minds, they say, well, they should have asked me this. Well, is there any one of those moments that you're feeling right now, we should have asked you this? Or would you like to save this?
I always think people write down the things that they want to know. I think that the thing that I hope for in this cycle is that people are looking for something different. People are looking for a new generation of leaders. And I'm concerned that we're getting into a pattern in our region where we recycle the same players and hope for a different result. And so I would just say that I think it's time to pass the baton, allow a new generation to try and step in and do some of these things with experience types that aren't there right now, quite frankly. But I'm not sure if there's any other particular question. I thought you had great questions.
And I do appreciate you being here, sharing with us your insight and inspiration and those types of things. The job of these offices are not easy today in light of the special kinds of conditions that we have. But I do agree with you, special conditions require special responses. And I'm very much so in support of that. And, and as I said earlier, y'all who are running with against this woman here, y'all, I'm here to share with y'all, look, you got a competitor coming at you, and she got some insight and inspirations for us. Alex, I kick it back over there to you, man.
get rid of the dysfunction, bring back some competency, and I think regardless of people's political ideology, they can agree with your statement saying that we are ready for some new faces and some new way of thinking and doing things. So I can definitely agree with that. So you got any particular dates you got coming up for the people, or is there any way they can contribute to your...
Something that's important for everyone to know is this is a primary. This is the last year that the county will have primaries. So this is actually May 21st is this election. The way that it will work this last time is whoever gets 50% plus one vote.
Wow.
So you'll get ballots May 1st, and you'll have until the 21st to submit them.
Okay.
But people aren't expecting it right now. Everyone's thinking about city council, which isn't until November. But the county races, both for district attorney and all of the county commissioners, are up this year. It's May 21st.
Okay.
Well, y'all tune in to PDX Black Rose, because we got more interesting content coming at you every other week. So look here, y'all. Give us a shout. Give us a peek. Go online. Check us out. PDX Black Rose, y'all.
Jessie, it was a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess.